Hi everybody, I'm Andrew Roberts from the Great Property Meet, and I'm here with Srini and Anjum, who are members of the community. Now, Anjum, do you want to introduce yourself first? What do you do?
Hi all, I'm a design and planning consultant and work with property investors and developers, helping them securing planning and building their own projects.
And Srini, do you want to give us an introduction as to who you are?
My name is Resi. I'm a property investor, and I'm jointly brought this property along with Andrew Roberts in this project.
Super. And we're here to actually do a little bit of an interview with Anjum to actually find out what went through his mind and the processes that we have used that are going to help you secure planning permissions faster on your projects, because we had quite a little bit of a stroke of luck, call it, or was it actually pre-planned, where we applied for our planning permissions on this site and secured them in 30 days or less, because we got 2 planning permissions, and Christmas was in the middle of that window. So, Anjum, thank you very much for securing it so fast for us. Do you want to describe the 2 planning permissions that we've got here for this property?
Hi guys, so this is a very interesting project that I give an opportunity to help Andrew and Srini to get them a planning permission on this project. So the idea that we come up with this one, just to give you a brief of this project, it's a former bank which was vacant, so our client bought the premises with an intention to convert into other use, or change the use from the bank into possible residential, so they can increase the return or the potential rent on the property. So then I come up with a very quite smart way of helping them out to find the best way of securing planning on this project without going into the extreme length of months and months to get the planning through. So the way we done on this project is, so this project is a bank with a ground floor all as a retail premises, and then they've got 2 floors above. They were using it as the offices instead to the main building. So we come up with 2 ways of securing the whole building into residential. So what we done is, under prior approval, a process under which we can convert the commercial premises into residential without having to have a 2 or 3 months of a planning permission in place. So under prior approval, part of the bank premises, at the back of the bank premises, we have converted that into residential. So we applied prior approval. The process usually takes 56 days to complete, as compared to the planning, which normally takes more than 2 months to complete. So we done the drawing, we put to the planning authority before Christmas, and in the window of 30 days, we have full prior approval in place, which is a record for us, because normally on these kind of projects, the process can lag sometimes 2 months, and it goes beyond that. And it doesn't end up here. We then come up with a different approach to convert their first and second floor into residential again. So we went ahead with a permitted development drive, which most of the people don't know much about, which are being there for many years. But we use that on this project to convert the storage space above this bank into 2 flats. And that process again just took us about 2 weeks to complete. And to cover our clients against any eventualities, we also put lawful development certificate on a PD right. That will allow us, our client, to secure the PD right, and could not be challenged, or could be used by the lenders or the bank without any problem. The LDC process again is a lengthy process, but we managed to secure it in a window of 30 days as well. So all in all, we started working with our investors, with our clients before Christmas, and by the first week of January, we have secured all 3 approvals for them. And today we are on this premises on our first meeting to crack on with the on-site work.
Fantastic. Well, that was a brilliant summary of the planning process. Now, what I'd like to add to that, Anjum, is from the point that we instructed the council, there was a couple of smart things that you did, which I'll get you to explain in a minute, but I'll just explain to the audience. On around day 9, after submitting the applications, I had a meeting on site with one of the planners. They came in, they looked at our proposed uses, they looked at the building, and verbally said, I'm going to write you a letter. I will aim to get it you before Christmas Day. Unfortunately, it came in a couple of days after Christmas that confirms I fully approve of what you're doing. Now, in order for us to beat the planners, so to speak, because you give a talk at the Great Property Meet every month on how to beat the planners, there are 3 criteria that the planners can assess a project against. And what we did was actually well, to save you work, Mr. Planners, we're going to tell you that we actually satisfy these criteria. Do you want to explain briefly what those 3 criteria are? And on another day, we might share in another video the detail behind those 3. So, Anja, what are the 3 criteria that the planners assess an application against?
The first one is any project where you want to change the use of the building to a different use, which normally are an investment requirement to buy a new premises, you normally go to the full planning approval route. Planning approval route is a quite cumbersome process, and there are statutory requirements for that process to go through, and then we have to create load of surveys to support that application, and the process normally takes from in preparing the initial plan and then submitting the planner. The minimum process from the application registered is 8 weeks. Before 8 weeks, you can't have any approval in place. And if there are complaints by the local residents, or if complaints by local businesses for the specific project, the project can go to a committee meeting. And if it goes to a committee meeting, then you add another month into the whole process. And even on that process, you could have a refusal. So the investor can possibly end up starting the project, assuming that in 2 months' time they will get approval secured. They might end up in 6 months. They have instructed a lot of other consultants to help on the planning process, and after 6 months' time, they have a refusal in place, and they are left with no other option. So alternative to that is a kind of ways which are not known to the investor people, is to use some new rights which were quite recently introduced to help restart the building process, and especially the high streets which are struggling. So the planning department did introduce quite a few new amendments to the existing planning approval process to make it quite simple. So we have used that one, and that one we call prior approval process. The prior approval process is only require you to kind of tick certain parameter on a planning process. If you comply with them, they can issue you an approval in a window of 3 to 4 weeks without spending too much time. So one of the very big differences, on a prior approval, the only fee that you pay to the planning authority is just a £96, as compared to the planning, where you just for a small job you pay a minimum of £462. So the major difference. And secondly, you don't need to carry out any surveys. You don't need to carry out highway impact. You don't need to do any other surveys on this process. It's like flood risk, yes. So these all things are not required as prior approval. So we really believe in, by using this prior approval process in this job, we really, in a nutshell, haven't given a planner an opportunity to even delay our project or refuse it. So we have a win-win for our client, where they have approval in just the windows of like 30 days. And this, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, in another video we'll go into the detail of what the criteria are that we used to push this through on the prior approval. So I think that's a really good and comprehensive answer, Andrew. Srini, do you have some questions that you'd like to ask?
Thank you, and you got this planning permission in a great speed. We really appreciate that. You mentioned earlier about prior approval, community development, and lot of things. Can you just briefly, for our viewers, tell what's the basic difference between the two terminologies? My understanding was PD is same as prior approval. Yeah. You're saying it's not necessarily the same. Yeah, can you explain that, please?
I would start with a permitted development.
Right.
So the permitted development rights are being attached to all the planning processes that currently we use to secure different projects. It's one of the route which normally developers use to convert premises, but the permitted development rights have a certain criteria attached to them. So that is what we have used on this project on the first and second floor. So under the PD rights, on a commercial premise like this one, you can convert the floors above your retail premises into residential. And that does not require any approval from the local authority. You can convert it as and when you want to convert the premises to, maybe it's a need in your business to bring more rents in, if the retail is struggling in that area, so you convert it to residential. So you can do that under permitted. Now, the things become complicated when you have investors involved, or you have a lenders involved, or a different parties involved in a project. For them to satisfy their criteria, the planning authority suggests or declines that they should apply for lawful development of the changes they are introducing the premises under these permitted development rights. It gives them an extra layer of protection to their investment, because they might implement it properly, or they might miss something on that, which could be challenged by a bank, or even the planning authority come and challenge them that you have breached the permitted development right, so you can't do that. You need full planning. So the lawful development certificate is a legal document which the planning authority review and give you a certificate confirming that the PD rights that you have applied on this building, they are fully compliant. So they will turn up on site, they check your premises, and then they will give you a legal document to confirm. So that will address these two things that you asked. The prior approval is slightly new kind of approval. What the planning department have done is to make it easy for investor to help address the shortage of housing, to allow them to convert part of the retail premises only on the ground floor level to part into residential, if it helps them to create more footfall in the area, put it that way. So the prior approval is totally different to permitted development. It has a certain criteria attached to it, which you need to comply with to use this to your benefit.
So can it be refused? I understand PD cannot be refused by the local authority. Can the prior approval be refused?
Very, very good question. Yes, PD could be thrown out of the window, and that has happened quite a few times as well. There are quite a few criteria which against they check. One of them is, say, for highway impact. The other they check is that if you are converting a retail premise in a well-established high street, you are taking away the retail part of it to a residential. That could have a negative impact on that high street, so they can refuse you on that basis. If there's a flood risk, they can refuse that basis. So that is not a permitted development. It's not an automatic approval, but it's way too easy than to be full planning approval, because they can't look inside your building. They can't dictate the layout of your flat. So there are certain benefits to prior approval as compared to the full planning route. So it is something that we should use on all these retail premises when you convert them.
Will it be granted in 56 days, just like the PD?
The way around it, one of the things, very interesting thing attached to the prior approval route is that the way it's laid out is that you submit application to the planning department, and they have 56 days to assess your application against these criteria: flood risk, highway. If they have a capacity and time to do that within 56 days, they will check and they can then refuse on that basis. But for some reason, if they're busy in some other big projects and they didn't have a capacity to check all these criteria, 56 days have gone, then it's an automatic approval.
Just like the PD, right?
Just like a PD, right? But you need to hold your horses, put back on 56 days. But if you work in a smart way on these projects, just like we did on this job, you can cut that time scale from 56 days to technically 3 or 4 weeks. Just to mention that on another job in Birmingham, that's our record, we have secured an office to residential within 2 weeks. We do the same route, but we done our homework properly. Cut that 56 days to only 2 weeks.
And coming back to the lawful development certificate, it's just purely strengthening your case for lending purposes and remortgage. Is that right?
That's 100%.
Yes.
Lawful development is not a mandatory requirement. Planning authority can't enforce you to put lawful development on it. It's purely for the purpose of making your investment safe. You don't run into it. So put it that way, you are giving the opportunity to the planning authority to work on your behalf, to check everything for you, and then give you a legal document. So now it's not a mandatory at all. It's just for the purpose of your own
Making it more safe.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Andrew.
Well, last question for today. Now, this was something which came up through the legal process during our purchase of this site, and it's to do with Section 106. Now, we had this conversation because I knew the answer, but I wanted to double check with yourself and put something to our lender, because our lender's solicitor was saying, I need to know how much you're paying on the Section 106 and put this into the documents. Now, the top and bottom of it is, there is no Section 106 payable on this site where we are creating 3 flats, 3 dwellings. Anjum, do you want to give a brief summary as to why this doesn't fall within Section 106?
That's a very interesting question. On a commercial change of use project, or the project we have done under these 2 different approvals, because we are not creating any new floor space, we are just converting an existing floor space into residential, so that is not applicable on our project.
Yeah.
So that's one of the good things. And the second thing is that you need to create more than 100 square meter of residential space, new space, to that apply. So normally commercial projects like these ones are exempt from these kind of criteria. And secondly, sometimes the local authorities decide in certain areas they don't enforce these kinds. Something like a sill charges are not applicable if there is no, they normally put a certain rates against different uses. So maybe in this area, if they convert it to 0, then we don't need to apply that one as well. So these routes, that's a very interesting thing. Using these routes will save you a lot of money that you normally pay on a normal kind of route. Section 106, still charges and all that.
Well, the other thing, just for the audience out there, really smart on the sill is if you are liable to pay a sill, you can make yourself exempt if you make the accommodation for the use of social housing, because sill is exempt on social housing.
That is true,
correct.
Yeah.
So there's various routes and angles that you can take to avoid having to pay the sill. Now, I think we've had a fantastic time working with a brilliant architect here, Anjum Mahmood of Anjum Design. It's great to have the opportunity to share this with Srini. So thank you very much today for taking the time to come and view us on site.
Thank you, Angel. It's been really appreciated what you've done for this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.